Romans chapter 12, and then we'll go to 1 Samuel 16 after we read a little bit later, but we'll get to that next. So continuing our series, It's Not What You Think. Basically, the theme is we have our expectations and maybe our natural inclinations and how we react in certain areas of life and how we expect things to go. And with God, sometimes things are not the way we think they should be. God does things differently than humans do. And so even with what we talked about the last couple weeks and loving your enemies and blessing them that curse you, and then kind of the final part of this, I guess you could call it a trilogy a little bit, in that those verses there is bless them that curse you was last week. I think I opened the wrong one. Well, that's embarrassing. Okay. Let's see here. Yep, I did. All right, so we're going to have to go back into iCloud and open the right. Technical difficulties. Okay, go back. Hopefully it's there. Let's see. Oh, that's what I have. That's the one we want. Something did not get saved. Well, that's unfortunate. Yeah, that's last week's lesson for sure. Okay, let's see. We can still fix it because Apple.
Last week, so it's okay.
Oh, so yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Apple's wonderful though, so we should be able to, if I have it saved here, to be able to put it up there anyway. Okay. There we go. Talk amongst yourselves. Topic of discussion is water wet. There. I knew that would start something. All right, let's see. No, I think I didn't save it either at all, period. That's unfortunate. Well, we might be out. Yeah, because that's the same one. Clearly did not save the new file. That's unfortunate because that's work just wasted. Okay, so no PowerPoint, no keynote today. I hope you can still pay attention. Hope I can still stay on track. So, sorry. There we go. This is, you just roll with it. It's okay. We don't need pictures, right? We're adults. We don't need to be entertained. Oh, no. That does not sound confident that is true. All right, well, okay, so we've been talking about love your enemies, bless them that curse you, as was just shown. But then also this week is overcome evil with good. And so if you want to go to Romans chapter 12, we'll read that first. Romans chapter 12. And see, I had the verse up there and everything now too, so it's going to really mess things up. It's okay. It's all right. We'll live. Good thing Romans is easy to find. Romans chapter 12, we'll drop down to verse number 18. We'll read through the end of the chapter here, and then we'll go to 1 Samuel. So Romans chapter 12, verse number 18, the Bible says, If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink, for in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. And that's the thought process. And we could go to Matthew and Luke too, or Luke as well, where Jesus talks about loving your enemies and blessing them that curse you and doing good to them that despitefully use you and persecute you, right? That's what Jesus said. It is doing good to those that actively are doing bad to you. And that's the whole process and the theme of the last three lessons that we talked about. And what Jesus was saying is that it's a hard thing to do. And we talked about the last couple of weeks, loving your enemies, people that are actively against you, to show them the love that God shows us is an antithesis of what we want to do. It's an antithesis of what is just naturally we feel like is just what we want to do. If people are mean to us, we want to be mean to them. If they're mean to our family, we want to be meaner to them because that's not me, that's my wife, or that's my kid, or that's, my extended family. And that's our natural tendencies. But Jesus says that's not how it should be. Even those that hate you, even those that are your enemies, you love them. Those that curse you, and that the word cursing means that they say bad things about you. They try to destroy your reputation. They verbally assault you. Those people, you say kind things to them. Those people, you bless them. You praise them. You lift them up. And that, again, that's opposite. That's not a natural inclination. And this week, overcoming evil with good. And evil being evil. I mean, evil's evil. It's bad. It's negative. It's sinful sometimes. It is something that you can be overcome by and overcome with. And so while this is similar to that theme of bless them that curse you, it takes it a step further. Blessing them that curse you, we talked about, is saying nice things to and about those that say bad things about you. Whereas overcoming evil with good is taking it a step further to do things nice and blessing and positive for those that do evil towards you or yours. And so it's kind of like when two kids are fighting in the recess, out on the playground. They're fighting each other, and you split them up, and you say, "Why did you hit him?" "Well, he hit me first." And that's typically how that fight starts. And even as adults, we aren't out throwing fists at people in the parking lots most of the time. Not to say that never happens, but most of the time that doesn't happen with normal human beings, adults. But that is our natural response, is that you struck out at me, you better watch out, I'm coming back twice as hard. And we almost feel justified in that attitude and justified in that type of mentality. And it's natural to feel that way. But God tells us our response as Christians, that's not the case. It's not Jesus saying don't defend yourself. It's not Jesus saying don't defend your family, right? But it's Jesus saying our natural response is not you hit me, I hit you back. We're not the mob, right? That's not how Jesus operates. And we're going to look at David again. We looked at David last week with Shimei and how he cursed David unjustly and unfairly, and how David's response to Shimei was mercy and grace. And even though Shimei his heart actually didn't change, he repented, he asked for forgiveness, but didn't actually change, and it came back, and God took care of him. And how David allowed God to handle that. So we're going to look at David again. So if you're in 1 Samuel 16, looking back to David and his example here in doing good to overcome evil, chapter 16, verse number 13. And we're going to jump through a few different chapters here, just kind of give a background. We all probably are aware of this, but just how David was brought up. So in chapter 16, verse number 13, we see David being anointed king, right? So Samuel took the horn of oil, anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. So we know that God's hand is upon David, and he is anointed as king. This is from God. This is how David is going to be. And it's known. It's not just like it's a secret ceremony, right? His whole family's there. Samuel is there. So everybody is going to find out and know that David is going to be the next king. That is the plan. That is God's plan. And obviously we know how King Saul responds to that. Let's go down to verse number 23 of 1 Samuel 16. Verse number 23, so Saul asked David to come and play the harp for him when he gets upset, and David does so. He serves. Verse number 23, it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So while David is anointed to be king, he's waiting to be king for God's timing. Saul is currently king. He works for Saul, and he blesses Saul, and he does good, and he serves the king that God has put in place at the time. So David plays the harp. He calms and soothes King Saul, and is basically at Saul's command, whatever Saul wants. He serves him willingly with a good spirit. He's not in there saying, I'm going to be king, right? Like I'm about to, that's my seat you're in. Right? He doesn't have that attitude. He's got an attitude of service. Drop down to chapter 17, verse number 32. Chapter 17, verse number 32. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go fight this Philistine. So you have Goliath, right? And Goliath is having this, we know the story of David and Goliath, and David volunteers. Saul knows David already. It's not like this is the first time he's seen him. So Saul knows David. They have a relationship. He knows that David is a musician. And David's like, let's go get him. And so Saul gives him his armor. We know that whole story. But David stood up and defeated Goliath for Israel, right? He wasn't doing it for him. David wasn't saying, I'm the king. I'm going to be king, so I'm going to do this to look good. David did it to serve his nation, to serve his king, to serve his Lord. And so David has done everything up to this point with Saul, with that whole relationship and his position rightly. He has served well. He has done things that are good for the king. He has done things that are good for the nation. He has done nothing but positive things in his life with everyone involved, right? He's a good kid. He's a good young man, and he's doing everything right, right? And we can think, we think sometimes in our life that if I'm doing good, right, if I'm living right, I'm doing good, I'm serving, I'm trying to be the best husband and or wife I can be, the best mom or dad I can be, and I'm doing everything right and good, I deserve good to be done back to me. And that's how we expect life should go. I do right, right should happen back. I should be treated right just like I treat everybody else right because I'm doing to others what I want them to do to me. And that can be the way we expect life to go, and then it doesn't. And we can get upset about that. We can get shocked by that, depressed by that. But here again, we have David. Same thing. He continues to do right. Drop down to chapter 18. Go to verses 6 through 9. So here we have some praise that David is going to get for the good that he has been doing. So 1 Samuel 18, chapter 18, verse number 6. says, it came to pass as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tabrets and joy, with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? We know that's going to be the case. Verse number 9, Saul eyed David from that day forward. So you have David and Saul out fighting the Philistines together, winning battles, being victorious. And they come back and they get praise. Both of them get praise. Saul gets praise. David gets praise. David gets a little bit more praise. I guess 10 times more praise than Saul does. And that bothers Saul. And we already know that's Saul's problem. That's not David's problem. David did nothing to encourage that. He did nothing to demand that. He's not trying to one-up Saul. He's just doing what God has told him to do and doing his best to serve his king and his nation. Just living his life in the best way that he can. And Saul has a problem with the accolades that David is getting versus the accolades that he is getting. So again, that attitude, I've been doing good, I should receive good. Well, in David's case, that begins to change. So go down to verse number 11. So David comes in again to play music for Saul, to calm him. And what happens? Verse number 11. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. So David does good his whole life. He is anointed king. He serves his nation. He serves his current king. And then his king tries to murder him twice. He has attempted murder on David's life 2 times in a row, right? And I think sometimes we read it as Bible stories. We're like, wow, yeah, he tried. But think about it. Imagine you had a friend or somebody that you were close to that you served with, and all of a sudden something switched and they tried to shoot you. They tried to stab you. They tried to murder you at your place of employment. That is what happened here. David went to work, and his boss tried to kill him. His friend tried to kill him. And it didn't just happen one time. It happened again, right? It happened twice. And imagine being David. It's like, what? He literally tried. Saul's thought was, I'm going to stab him to the wall. Like, he threw it so hard he wanted to go through his body and stick to the wall and him to hang there. That's in Saul's mind. That's how he's describing it. That's how the Bible describes it. And so as David doing good and being good and having good works and just living the right way, he's being met with evil. Hardcore evil, just right in his life that would affect him completely. So David was the future king. He's been anointed as king, and he's nothing but a blessing to Saul, to Israel, and his reward is attempted murder. That is what happens to him. Chapter number 19, verse number 1. So Saul's trying to kill David. He's so mad. Saul spake to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants that they should kill David. So he goes to Saul, to his son Jonathan, who we know they're friends with David, but he's like, Jonathan, I need you to kill David. And then he goes, Saul says to all his servants, again, he's the king, so he has lots of servants. He goes to all his servants and says, you guys, I want you to kill David. So it's not just Saul that's throwing javelins. Now he's telling his family to kill him and everyone that's in his employ. They have to obey the king, kill David. Right? And now we know from this point on, David spends years running from Saul. He can't stay there anymore. He has to leave. He lives in caves. He's in the wilderness. He's running, literally running for his life. And we know throughout the stories of him running for his life, he has opportunities in those moments to end Saul's life. A couple of times he has an opportunity to end David's need to run, be justified in doing so. Like no one around him, no human being in that area would say, David, you should not kill him. They even encouraged it. Kill Saul. You're king anyway. You're supposed to be king. This guy's trying to kill you unjustly, end his life. Just get rid of all this and you can be king now. And we know that he doesn't do that. He's justified, though, if he wanted to. But he doesn't. And even when he's being chased and hounded and trying to be murdered all those times, he continues to reward Saul's evil with mercy, with good, with grace, allowing God to avenge him instead of taking it upon himself. So 3 lessons that we'll learn from David's experience and David's example there, through his ability to, when evil is constantly being done to him. And I don't think any of us have had to run for our lives for years because of someone trying to kill us. And David has been oppressed unjustly. There's no one that could say, well, maybe he deserved it a little bit. No, there's no even a sliver of reason that David should be treated the way he is. And even when that happens, he continues to offer Saul and those around him mercy and return good instead of what he would probably want to do and justify it by avenging himself. So the very first thing that we can learn from this is we can overcome evil by thinking properly. Thinking properly. And we know this is life. This is a life principle. What we think will determine what we do. It determines who we are. What we think, what we dwell on, what our mind goes to. The things that our mind first goes to when issues come, when evil comes our way. What we think about determines what we do and who we become. So first thing we have to do is we have to think properly about ourselves. We have to have the correct perspective and the correct thoughts about who we are. Both times that David had opportunity to kill Saul, he responded with humility. If you want to go to chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, chapter 24, verse number 14. It says, after whom is the king of Israel come out, and after whom dost thou pursue? After a dead dog, after a flea. So Saul is there and he's talking to him. He says, who are you after? I'm nobody. Yeah, we know. He knows. Saul knows he's going to be king. He's somebody. And we know who David becomes. He is somebody. But David's perspective of himself in regards to Saul, the king, at this moment is, Saul, you don't have to chase. I'm nothing. I have nothing to worry about. I'm not trying to usurp your throne. And it's not just him giving lip service to Saul. He honestly believes about himself that he's nobody. He's still, in his mind, I don't doubt that he's still that shepherd boy. That's the lowest in his family, just out watching dad's sheep, doing what dad tells him to do. That's his view of himself still, is that he is the lowly servant, the lowly shepherd, just trying to do what God wants him to do, trying to do what his authorities want him to do. That's why he says, I'm a dead dog, I'm a flea. For the Israelites to call himself a dog, like they despised, a dead dog is kind of a big deal and kind of a dirty, you stay away from those things as Israelites. So David is saying, I am nothing, Saul. You have no reason to come after me. I am nothing. His perspective of himself is humbleness. Go to chapter 26, verse number 20. Chapter 26, verse number 20. Says, now therefore let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea, as when one doth hunt a partridge in the mountains. He's saying, I'm nobody. I'm nobody. And that's it. Again, that's not him just giving lip service to Saul and saying, oh, leave me alone, just pretend I'm not here. David's view of himself is that he's nobody. He is humble about who he is. He's not throwing out. You saw Samuel with that horn of oil, right? Like the oil was on my head. He doesn't have that attitude about himself. He doesn't have that boldness about himself. He is humble, and he is humble about who he is. So even though Saul is the one coming after him, Saul is the one in the wrong. David is still willing to look at himself and say, but who am I? In this situation, in this hunt that I am being pursued unfairly and unjustly, who am I really, though, still? And David says, I'm nothing. I'm a flea. I'm the thing that eats dogs, right? The thing that is way below the worst thing that we can think of. His response to Saul communicated that he posed no threat. And, he could have thought, I am the king. And yeah, you should be afraid of me. And you're lucky I didn't kill you, because I could have. And he could be bold in that way and even proud and prideful in that manner. That he doesn't deserve that kind of treatment from Saul because of who he's meant to be, because of who God has already said that he is, and that he deserves to be treated better because of that. And Saul, how dare you treat me that way? Do you not know who I am? And we feel that way sometimes. None of us are anointed to be king. None of us are probably going to build temples or, do the things that David did. But when people come at us and they treat us poorly, our one of our first attitudes are, who do you think you are, one? And do you know who I am? Do you realize who I am? Do you realize what you're doing to me? I don't deserve this. You deserve worse. And we justify to ourselves those thoughts. And sometimes that will justify ourselves to be able to talk about them in certain ways, to degrade them, to chop them down, and then sometimes even lead to actions. Again, to recompense evil, but with evil. And that's our natural desire to do, is to react that way, to say, you don't understand. I deserve to be treated better than that. Do you realize what I've done? And in some cases, it's somebody that turns against you, like Saul turned against David, right? And he could say, do you know all the things I did for you? And we could say that, someone that turns against you and maybe starts treating you in a way that is not fair. And you could say, I've done so much for you your whole life, our whole friendship, our whole relationship, and this is how you treat me. I deserve better than that. How dare you? Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am? And that can be our first prideful thought and thought process. And again, it's natural to think that way. But I think what God is saying here in overcoming evil with good, we need to not go down that path. We need to avoid that path. We need to understand that's the path we want to take immediately. And we need to stop ourselves from taking that path by thinking about who are we really? Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm not anybody. Right? Whatever position you have, whatever status we have got ourselves to, whatever thing we have attained to, any accolades or respect or anything that we've obtained in our life to this point, really, what is it worth? I mean, it's good to be respected, right? It's good to do your best and to attain to an area of where people can look at you and say, that's a model Christian. That's a model person. That's how I would point my son or my daughter to be like them as an adult. Those are admirable things. But when it comes down to the big picture of everything, we're all sinners. And we all deserve hell. And the only reason that we're not on our way to hell is because of what Jesus did for us and what God did for us. And so when we have that perspective, yeah, sometimes we get treated unfairly and sometimes it's really bad. And sometimes we really want to fight against it and we want to give into recompensing evil for evil. But when we realize who we are and we think about who we are, I don't think if we are honest with ourselves, we can really get to that point where that's justified, regardless of what's happened, because of who we really are. If we're honest with ourselves about thinking about who we are, a correct view of ourselves will humble us. It'll correct our thoughts that might lead to that type of desire, that type of behavior to return evil for evil. That's going to require us, though, to think properly about ourselves, to humble ourselves. Secondly, in our thinking, think properly about others. Right? David chose to view Saul not as an enemy deserving retribution, but as God's chosen leader. He was still king. David was going to be king, but in David's view and in God's view, Saul still was on the throne, so he was still God's chosen leader, and so he still treated him as such. Did he deserve to be stopped in his hunt for David? Yeah. But again, David decided not to make that his responsibility to handle. Right? Chapter 26, verse number 21, which is, you have to go back maybe a little bit here. Saul says, Then says Saul, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly. Right? So he has a moment here that David's treatment of Saul brings Saul's heart to repentance, right? He could have killed him, and Saul realized that, and he's like, I am so sorry. Come back. You did me good when I did you bad. And it changed Saul's heart for a moment, right? Albeit for just a moment, but it did. David's response and the way he treated others, the way he treated Saul, did change Saul's heart. But again, David is not in charge of or responsible for Saul's heart. That's not David's responsibility. He's not responsible for Saul's heart or Saul's response to David's actions. So even though eventually it does happen, Saul goes back and is like, no, I'll try to kill you again. That does not determine how David responds or how David treats him. David treats him based on what God has told David and how he wants to treat others, regardless of Saul's response, regardless of Saul's heart. When Saul's heart was repentant, he was happy about it, obviously. But when it got hardened again, he didn't change the way he treated Saul. He treated him the same way. David was able to choose for himself alone how he was going to treat others, how he was going to think about others, even the ones, and the one particularly, that was out to do him evil. Right? And that's, we will, when someone is out to do us evil, they become even if we don't do anything back to them in our minds, in our lives, in our consciousness, and kind of can dominate everything we do, they become a focal point. That person, that group, that entity, whatever it is that is doing you harm and unjustly doing your harm, become a focal point in your life that we almost obsess over. And it's cathartic, we feel like, to obsess over that and focus on the ones that have done us unjustly. But it draws our attention away from others, and it draws our attention towards really ourselves, and away from how God views other people. It can be a very dangerous road to go down, to focus on the thing or the people or the group that is out to do you harm. In Ephesians chapter 6, the Bible reminds us, we're not battling evil people, right? We're not out to battle evil people. We're battling evil, which is Satan. Satan and evil is the thing we're battling against, right? It's not flesh, right? It's not principalities, right? It's powers. It's the spiritual warfare that exists. It's not the person but that's what we make it about. We make it about the person or the thing that is in our situation that is out to get us, and that becomes the enemy. That becomes the thing we battle against and that we focus on. But we really need to realize it's not the person. It's Satan. It's evil itself. And so we need to make sure that we have the right perspective on the people, the others. That doesn't mean that there aren't bad people out there. There definitely are. But God loves them. God loves the bad people. God loves the people that hate us. God loves the people that hate you. There's no way around that. And the problem is we hate the people that hate us. We hate the people that don't stand the way we stand. And a lot of times we're very vocal about our dislike of those that stand against what we stand against. And we should stand for truth. And we always stand for truth. And you always stand hard for truth and what is right. You never back down from what God says is true. But the people, God still loves. God hates the sin. He loves the people. And that's a hard thing for us to delineate. Not hard for God. It's very easy for God. But for us, we have a hard time separating the person from the action. And if we want to be like David was here, he was able to separate Saul as a person from what Saul was doing to him and still treat Saul in the way that God wanted him to, and was merciful and returning good for evil instead of evil for evil. That's a difficult thing to do, but it is something that if we want to overcome evil with good, we have to think right about ourselves. We have to think right about others. Secondly, overcoming evil by doing right. So we have to commit to do things right. So it's not changing the way you operate, the way you live your Christian life, following God, trying to obey him, being the husband you're supposed to be, the wife, the mother, the father you're supposed to be, continuing to do the right thing, even though there are those out there trying to do evil towards you. Right? We're not responsible for what others do to us, but we are responsible for how we react and how we live our life. Right? If so-and-so did this terrible thing to me, so I have to do this back to them. So I respond in kind. Right? Returning evil for evil makes us victims of the wrongs that are done to us. Right? When we respond in similar fashion to the wrong that is done to us, we now become and made ourselves victims of that wrong. It has become the umbrella that overshadows our life. And it could be a season, it could be it could be your entire life. The wrongs that have been done to me become so focused on in my life that it becomes, I have to recompense in that way. And then we become that victim. And our life changes because of that. The way you live life changes because of that. But when you return good, when evil is done to us, that grants us victory. Not because we've done something, but because we've obeyed what Jesus says to do. And Christ grants us victory to overcome evil with good. So committing to do right in every situation, right? Always doing right. It's never okay to do wrong in order to do right. It's never okay to do wrong in order to do wrong. We should always, as Christians, do what is right in every situation because it's the right thing to do. Whether it's convenient, whether it hurts, whether it's hard, whether it's easy, whatever type of adjective or adverb we want to put against it, doing right is always the right thing to do, even when things are not being done to you right. When people don't treat you the right way, you still treat them the right way. When people are actively doing evil to you, you still do good to them, and you find other people to do good to around. Right? And I think that's a common principle throughout Scripture is when things are against you, you try as much as you can to do for as many as you can. Right? So when you don't feel like serving, that's probably when you should serve more. When you feel like you're being oppressed, when you feel like you're being pushed down, and you just kind of want to just stay home, and you just want to kind of curl up in a corner, and you want to kind of just draw the shades about everybody around you, so that you kind of just ostracize yourself and leave me alone, I need to heal. And I know there are some times where that's necessary. But when you feel that, that's probably the time where you need to open the shades more, and then you need to open your front door and let other people in. It's not just, you need to expand in the good and the right that you're doing and widen your circle. Again, it's opposite of what you want to do. Because no one wants to do that when they're being beaten down. No one wants to do that when they're unfairly being oppressed and being evil done to. We may not do evil back to someone because we know that's not okay, but we may just stop everything. We're not going to do evil, but we're just not going to do good either. We're just going to coast or float and just stop everything and just kind of insulate. And that's a different path to not good also. Bad grammar, right? Not really a good way to emphasize that point, but true. Just doing nothing will lead to bad as well. So we need to commit to do right all the time. And then we need to commit to making things right. Saul had no good reason for his actions against David. None. Yet it was David who tried to reason with Saul and deal with the conflict. If you're still in chapter 6, look at verse number 19. The Bible says, "Now therefore I pray thee," David is talking, "let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord hath stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods." So basically saying, if you have something against me that's justified, let me make it right. Let me bring an offering to you and make it right. If there's other people around you telling you that this is not how it should be, well, then they need to stop. But David is making the first step and saying, look, if there's something that needs to be fixed, let me fix it. So he's coming to Saul, who has no good reason for doing this to David. And David is saying, how can I fix it? What can I do, David, to fix this Saul? It's insane. It doesn't make sense. It's not something we would do. David is the one going. David is saying, if I did wrong, I want to make it right. He was quick to examine himself, right? Examining himself first to make sure that he's at peace with the person that's offending him. And then he attempted reconciliation, right? Even if the other party isn't willing. That's the goal. We could go to Matthew in chapter 18 if we had time about being the one to seek out to make things right, even if you're not the one, you're the offended, not the offender. You go to the offender and try to make it right. Even if the offender could care less, as in Saul's case. He could care less. He doesn't want to make it right. But David still attempted to do so. So you overcome evil by doing right. You try to do right all the time, and you commit to making things right. We'll speed up here this last point. The last thing is we overcome evil by letting go. By letting go. So when we hold on to burdens, we give ourselves unnecessary weight. When we hold on to those things, it just burdens us down. It becomes bitterness, right? We have to let it go. And there's a few ways to do this. And I'll finish this up quickly, a couple minutes. We have to recognize God's sovereignty, right? David knew that no matter how bad things got for him, God was sovereign. God knew, God is capable, God can take care, and God is able to do so. And David believed that, and he knew that. So David could let go because he knew God would take care of him, right? David knew he would continue to face persecution. He knew that he would continue to face stress because of Saul, but he was still willing to let God handle it. When David could have taken it into his hands, he still allowed God to do that, knowing that God is God and knowing that he is trustworthy. So is God to you trustworthy enough to have faith that he can vindicate you according to his way and his time? And that's the difficulty, right? Is you know that, and everyone would be like, yes, of course God is trustworthy. I believe that. I believe that God is trustworthy. But is he trustworthy? Do you believe he's trustworthy enough that when you could try to make things right, you don't try to vindicate, you allow God to do it, even in his time, even if you don't know what that time is. Maybe that never happens on earth, right? What if God never vindicates you on this earth while you're alive? Are you still thinking he's trustworthy enough and that's good? Is his timing good enough? Is his way good enough? Even if it's not anywhere near our timetable or what we think should be. That's faith. And I believe we all know in our head that, yeah, God is faithful and trustworthy enough that if that is the case, that must be the best case. But man, that's hard to live that way. And that makes it real, that when someone is doing evil against you, are you trusting God enough to allow God to handle it, no matter what the timing is, no matter how long that takes? Saul had done a lot of wrong to David, but David was willing to give all those wrongs to God because he knew God was a fair judge. So we have to know that he is sovereign and he is righteous. He judges. We could go to Genesis talking about he says, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? God is the righteous judge. He can only help, but only do right. That's all he will do. That's all he'll ever do is the right thing every time. God always does the just thing in every situation. It may not be immediate like we would prefer, but always it is just when God deals with situations. So that means he loves you. He cares for you as his child. He will do by you justly and rightly all the time. So can you trust him to do that? David's conviction was that God is righteous and would judge Saul so he didn't have to take matters into his own hands. And in 1 Samuel 24, he talked about it. So I'll finish here. God will do right all the time, and he will do right by you every time. He will discipline his children, and that includes us if we're ever in the wrong, and he will also deal with those that have done wrong. God tells us about that. He deals with those that have done wrong. There is no benefit to us to hold on to the hurt or to seek more hurt or to avenge hurt. There's no benefit to us. It only ends poorly. So allow God to handle it. When we overcome evil with good, we allow God to work in amazing ways and demonstrate his love to those who do not even maybe realize they need it. Right? Unjust acts towards us give opportunity to do good, to overcome evil. It is not easy. It is not natural. But when bad things come your way, it's an opportunity for you to allow God to work in you to do good instead. It's the same idea with trials. When trials come your way, it's an opportunity, not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to say, okay, how's God going to get involved here? How's God going to take something bad and turn it out to be good? And that It's hard to have that perspective, but that can be an exciting time. That could be a time to say, okay, God, all I can do is let you have it. There's nothing I can do about it, so I give it all to you. Do what you're going to do, because it's going to be good. That's a difficult thing to do, but overcoming evil, that's how we do it, is with good and with God letting us do that.